There are moments in life when financial decisions matter the most, and they tend to happen when you're the least equipped emotionally to make them. Today, we're going to talk about how to navigate money during one of those moments when you're experiencing the debilitating grief after the death of a loved one. I'm Betty Wang, host of Betty's Smart Friends. I help women navigate big life transitions and make confident decisions about their money. And today's conversation is for anyone who has experienced loss or loves someone who has. Because when life changes overnight, whether it's losing a spouse, stepping into a caregiving role, or suddenly becoming the one responsible for financial decisions, it can feel overwhelming very quickly. I'm joined today by Christopher Dale. He's a certified financial planner and a certified financial transitionist. He's the founder of Life After Grief Financial Planning. Chris specializes in helping people navigate the financial side of grief, what to do, what not to do, and how to move forward when everything feels uncertain. He's also the author of a powerful new book, Life After Grief, Holding the Numbers with Shaking Hands When Money, Trauma, Grief, and Racism Collide. The book captures what it really feels like to make financial decisions when your world has been turned upside down. I've had the honor of receiving an early copy of it ahead of its April 29th release. And it's a deeply personal book that I believe will help many people navigate difficult times. And what makes Chris's perspective especially meaningful is that it's grounded in lived experience. He's been the caretaker, he's been the decision maker, and the one trying to rebuild after a devastating loss. He's also a colleague, a mentor, and a friend, and we're so lucky to have him here with us today. Chris, welcome, and I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for
Thank you,
being here.
Betty. I feel like you're the smart friend here. So,
No, no, no. No. Chris and I were talking beforehand, and I am so intimidated with him being on here. But you're so accomplished, Chris, and amazing, amazing human. And so I'd love to share with people a little bit about your story. As we learn, or as readers will learn in your book, you've experienced a lot of loss in your life. And through these times, you've been the person that your family has looked to deal with the practical financial aspects, whether you are ready or not. And all while you're processing the deep grief yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and maybe share, if you can, put it into words, how those moments, those big moments feel?
sure. I appreciate all the accolades. First and foremost, the feeling is totally mutual, and I look up to certain people, and I look up to certain people because of what they value, how they approach life, and their candor. And I take a lot of other people's energy, and I try to spend time with people that I value. And Betty is in that circle. So that's before I explain anything about me and kind of what got me here. I like to give credit where credit is due. To answer your question, my life changed dramatically in 2008. I was a caregiver for both my parents, essentially, up until 2008. My mother was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1994. She had aggressive treatments, bone marrow transplant, chemotherapy, radiation, and she experienced Alzheimer's because of the aggressive treatments. There were some other things that went on, which I found out about later. And so in 2008, again, I was a caregiver for my mother. I had to place her into a nursing home at my expense at $5,000 a pop. And then my father, several months after my mom passed away, he passed away. But in advance of that, my wife and I purchased their home. And this is right, the real estate boom. And I was probably 32 or so at the time. I had no money, and I had to figure out quickly how to be able to fund my parents when they ran out of money. I had to quickly figure out how to bridge this careful gap between, and Betty and I were talking about this before the podcast, when there's any inheritance, right? Siblings or beneficiaries fight, no matter who they are. There was no inheritance, and there was no inheritance because I chose to purchase my parents' house. That was their only asset. And that was something that I knew my brother and I would fight over. And so that's really where kind of my story begins. For me, it was kind of life changing. And August of 2008, my mom passed away. Um, November of 2008, my father passed away. But my life didn't change in those moments. The day that my father passed away, and I hope I'm not breaking this for you in the book, there was something dramatic that happened that shifted, and I'm not going to tell you, Betty, because I don't think you've read that part, that it
Yeah.
shifted, that it shifted everything that I knew about my life. It was one phone call, and my brother is very blunt, and he said everything that you knew about your life before that was a lie.
Wow.
And so, but what it did is it put in perspective experiences that I went through as a child. It really honed in this experience of why I have such an allegiance to manage and control money. And there were just certain things that happened, as I was growing up, but didn't understand. I just dealt with things as they came. And so it's very, very complex. And then as you alluded to, I experienced some deaths after that happened. So my parents passed away, like I said, in 2008. My paternal grandmother, who was the matriarch of our family, passed away in 2010 or so. So about a year and a half after. And then my wife and I were expecting twins in 2012. And so we lost one of the twins. So we have two living sons and we have three sons total. So it put hair on my chest, so to speak. And it made my perspective on life dramatically different, kind of going forward.
How did you get through? I mean, these are times where when people are going through any of these losses that you went through kind of all in quick succession, um, there are certain things, practical things that need to happen, right? And people were looking to you to do that. What, for folks who are in that situation right now, um, what would you want them to know?
Well, if I take the very specific situation where I had my parents' house, and it's always going to be their house no matter who owned it, right? I was just the bank at the time. I had this house, and at the bottom of the real estate market, I had to make a decision whether I was going to sell the house or whether I was going to maintain it to rent it out. I had no one to help me out with that decision. My position now is I'm helping people like that. And it's to
Right.
the point of your question. I made the right decision, right? I was able to separate the emotional component and make the technical decision at that point. And the technical decision was I sell this house at a loss. I'm still going to be on the hook for some money, or I rent it out and the house will go up in value, right? That's a very hard decision to make when you're emotionally involved, especially if you have no one to give you guidance, right? So those are the kind of things that we as advisors help clients to make those decisions. And candidly, one of the things I'm going to tell you not to do, when my parents died, I drank a lot. I had no other skill set to deal with this. And you talk about specifically, I work with women now that have lost a spouse. It's not who I exclusively work with, but just the nature of my business. I reached a pit in my stomach that I could not null or void until I drank to nauseam, right? That wasn't a healthy way. That was the only way that a 32-year-old Christopher Dale knew how to cope. But that went on for 30 days. And I figured out that I could not do that. So what I did after that, I'm spiritually grounded. I engaged my friends. I engaged my pastor. I call him my personal priest. And so I started to get some help, right? He had recommended for me to go to grief counseling. And for me, my experience was unlike anyone my age. And
Yes.
so it was only in the grace of folks that were 20 and 30 years older than me say, hey, we've been through these experiences. Now they're normal, and they were normalized. They weren't so foreign to me. The other thing too that I learned back then was, and this is very, very difficult to do when you're grieving, but when you give back, it kind of ranks where you are in the world. And my wife was going on a missionary trip to Ghana. And I was like, well, I'm going to be here by myself. I'm just going to be wallowing in my own pity. And I went to Ghana, and you talk about the Americanized society, right? And, you know, people want to have the latest watch, or they want to have the latest jeans or the latest iPhone. I went there, and there was a child in the market, right? He had nothing but a stick with a piece of string, and it was a bug that was tied around this string, and he had a toy. And I was watching him, right? It cost him nothing other than the time and energy and the thought to create this. And I said to myself, man, that's pretty cool. I was a medical assistant to a dentist, but giving of myself was such a great feeling. And on that trip, I thought nothing about what had happened at home, right? And I'm totally giving to these other folks. And so, to answer your question directly, my spiritual journey, my aspect of surrounding myself with people that could support me, and then me giving back, that is really what helped me.
What about the financial pieces for someone who's going through this? What are things that they should not rush into? Or, I mean, I think, some of my clients are widows as well, not my exclusive focus, but I find that they are want to do everything because that's what they think they're supposed to do,
Sure,
but they can't handle, or it's not that they can't handle, they're just so overwhelmed.
sure.
And there's so much noise out there. And I mean, another thing we should talk about is like, this is when they are the most vulnerable. This is where sketchy folks come out of the woodwork. So,
100%.
um, what, what were things in not only through work, but your experience going through some of these losses that you're like, these can wait? Um,
I'm going to answer that question with a story with a recent widow.
yeah.
And so I had a recent widow that was referred to me. She was very, very high functioning, an executive functioning lady, but she couldn't function. And it was really bothering her, and she couldn't figure out why. And she had all this chaos really going on in her mind. And I'm going to bridge the gap here. No different than when I was going through all that chaos my own. Okay. Very, very similar. And I can't say that I ever have the same experience of a widow, but the grief mirrors each other, and the emotions mirror each other. And so as I'm, talking to this widow, and I'm putting her into a couple of categories, right? Is she analytical, or is she emotional? And her executive functioning would say that she's analytical, but her natural style is she's intuitive, is what I would call, and she wants to assimilate with people that have a like experience. So I honed in on that aspect, right? And so as we're talking, I'm trying not to overwhelm her, and I go to her house, and her house is very well organized, but I could just see it on her face that she is just completely out of it. And so what I did for her in that time is I did some meditation, and I do a lot of meditation now. And I wanted to get her level set to where she could at least concentrate for the next several hours, right? And a lot of advisors, when they're first encountering someone that's in that situation, really don't know how to approach it, or they're very, very uncomfortable about doing so. So in this situation with this widow, she was like, wow, I feel like relaxed for the first time in a long time. And then we are able to go through some things to help her out in the immediacy, right? And so the immediacy of not making big financial decisions, the immediacy is not taking the advice of everybody, right? And not making decisions on emotion. That's probably the biggest thing. When I talked about the house, that was something that I was able to sidestep, making a decision on emotion. And I would say for 99% of the population, one of the keys to being able to eliminate that emotional component is having a buffer. That buffer, Betty, is you. The buffer is someone that does stuff like you, a peer, a colleague like that. Having someone in your corner, it could be even a trusted friend or a family member. But I think that is very, very key because you don't know what you don't know unless you talk to someone else. And so when I am working with folks, I say, don't make timely decisions. Decisions can be forgiven, right? And don't make decisions that are irrevocable. A decision that is irrevocable would have been me selling that house back in 2008 when I had a loss on the house. That's an irrevocable decision. But someone in our capacity can help you out with that.
Yeah, I mean, I should mention that Chris also trains advisors like me who are working with people experiencing loss because not everybody takes the time and therefore can't be as effective with their clients when they're going through this experience. There is science that shows that women, men, anyone who's grieving, their brains just don't process things. There's scientific evidence of that. So,
Brain
yeah,
fog.
yeah, brain, yes. And so Chris holds seminars and teaches advisors how to go through these processes. How in your book you say, my clients don't join my team, I join theirs. So it's how can we as advisors be part of your team of somebody who's grieving or our client's team rather than seeing it the other way around. So I think everything you're saying is speaks to the special place that you hold in your client's life and for you to take that time. I don't think people realize that they're not all advisors are made the same,
I would
right?
agree with you. And I'll take that a step further and thank you again for the accolades. I think if your heart is in the right place, a lot of things can be forgiven. You can stumble a lot. And as long as your heart is in the right place, and there's no doubt I have stumbled through a lot of clients and in this process and this learning process, and me getting to the point where I only want to work with the clients that I want to work with, I've lost some clients that don't fit that mold of life after grief, right? They are focused on something else. And that was a stumbling block really for me. But what it did is it opened the doors for me to really, laser focus on the clients that I want to help with. Because again, like you had said, I have so much lived experience that for me would be, I would feel guilty if I weren't giving back.
Well, I think you and I have talked about it. If for you and for me, this our profession is a calling. It's not our profession, I guess. It's what I feel like we were called to do in a way. Can you explain to our listeners what life after grief means to you and how you work with your clients? I think what you do is so special for those who are lucky enough to call you their trusted advisor.
Well, life after grief, what it means for me. So, um, my boys and my family are at the top of my list, right? I rank things in my life. So God is at the top, then my family, and then friends. And so I was trying to figure out when I was working in the corporate world, they didn't care about, my family or the life work balance. They just cared about me producing a certain amount of money. And I respect that, right? That wasn't fulfilling for me. And I had this, we've disclosed here this experience. And what was more fulfilling for me were to help people like Chris Dale back in 2008. And so I figured out a way with very good help. I had a very good mentor at the time. She has since passed away. That helped me. She said, Chris, you have the technical knowledge. We just need to get you on the other side. She said, who do you want to work with? And I said, I guess I want to work with people that were like me. And I had pressure. And the pressure was I wasn't able to spend as much time with my boys, right? And my father wasn't there, early in my life, and he came back in late in my life. But I never wanted my boys to experience that, right? If I can control that, and it's a shame because my mark, Chris Dale's mark, can be so much broader and more by putting the stamp on two young boys. And I had no idea really what that meant until today, where they give that back to so many other kids in the form of coaching or whatever they do. And obviously my wife and I were a team, a solid team. And so the life after grief came as a result of her experiencing all this stuff alongside of me. And then me going to her and say, hey, I want to make this dramatic change. I don't want to work in the corporate world. I want to start my own practice, right? We have no backup plan. And the backup plan is Anne Marie is my wife, you going back to work because the boys were a little bit older. Now we have an insurance, but my cushion as far as the income that I'm, making from this corporate job, that's gone, right? And we have to plan for 12 months of no income. That's going to be a shift. And she said, yeah, let's do it. I was like, whoa, okay. And
Well, everything you shared about her, she sounds like a badass.
yeah,
So
she
she sounds
is.
very formidable.
Yeah, she is. And so we took that leap of faith together, and I only went 3 months without income. And so what that did is it allowed me to do a lot of other things ahead of schedule and for other people. So this life after grief now morphed into what you had said, training other advisors. Because I'm out just doing my thing, just trying to keep things afloat. And then there's one advisor, he caught wind of what I was doing, and he said, hey, man, can I steal like an hour of your time? And so then there was another advisor and another advisor. And it became a little bit overwhelming for me because my bread and butter is my financial practice. And so I said, well, this is a need for other advisors. So let me just put something together. And then it just kind of morphed from there, and it became very, very fun and very fulfilling. And they overlapped, right? And I found out through talking to other advisors, different situations than any ones that I encountered. So now my learning curve is not just singularly Chris Dale, it's hundreds of just different scenarios.
Oh, I want to get back to your book a little bit, just because I think it's going to be really helpful for people, and I think the visual of holding the numbers with shaking hands. Can you talk a little bit about, how you picked that phrase and why? And I know everybody deals with grief differently, but I think it really gets to the heart of what people really have to deal with when they're dealing with loss and also an estate.
Sure. Holding the numbers with shaking hands. So we'll talk about life after grief. I think is pretty self-explanatory, but holding the numbers with shaking hands. So as I gave you that example of my wife and I purchasing my parents' house, right? Don't have money, but I had great credit thanks to my parents, right? They gave me some very good financial backing and some very good financial things that happened for me. So had good credit along with my wife. And so we were able to purchase their house, right? I don't know what I'm doing at the time. I just know that I need to be in control of what's going to happen next. And so I'm going along, and literally as I'm going along, you can just imagine my hands are shaking because my mom is sick and she's ailing, don't know where the end is in sight. And so then they start needing money, right? And so 2004 is when we purchased their house. The real estate market started to escalate for 4 more years until, we hit that bottom and everything just fell out. But in those years, what I was able to do is I was able to go and get a line of credit on their house and extend it every year. Had no idea that I was going to be able to do that. And getting credit at the same time was so easy. But what I didn't know is in 2008, when the bottom fell out, I had this home that was not worth what I could sell it for. So now I'm shaking and I'm panicking. There's such an extreme amount of stress that goes along with that. And then I have to make this decision like I had already talked about. And all along, I have a financial mind. Betty, you have a financial mind. But then this is real life stuff that you're having to deal with. And so there's so much unknown during this time frame. I don't know what's going to happen next. So my parents, the way that it worked out, so again, like I said, it was their home. They were paying all the expenses on the house. And again, I was just the bank because I could now give them money as they needed money. But when they both passed away, there was no money coming into the house at all. So I had to make some quick decisions and shaking hands because you don't know what's coming next. But when you don't have an income source, you figure out things very, very quickly. Betty, I had to have 3 estate sales to get rid of the stuff in their house. And that was during December, and it was bad timing. The estate sale people felt bad for me because the first 2 didn't work. And the house was in disarray. My parents had a cat at the time, and they stopped letting the cat out. And so the cat, messed on, did his thing on the carpets. And so had to have the carpets ripped out, had to have the house basically renovated before I could rent it out. And where do you get that money from? And so it's just this whole, and then I rent the house out. And now I'm having income. Now I can breathe a little bit, just a little bit. Okay. Because I rented it out to older college students whose parents signed the lease, and there was a drug raid on my parents' house.
Wow.
And you talk about things just replicating and figuring out stuff as you go. And again, remember that house that I purchased that was underwater? Well, now I'm in a different situation that Orange County was in a deficit financially. And this is what I was told by my defense attorney, that they could have seized that house. So matters now go from bad to worse. And so getting through those situations and figuring out who has got your back and how you can perform, right? And I've made it through those situations. There were some bad situations that I've been in. And you just have to have faith in yourself that you are going to make it to the next point. And I said this to a buddy of mine yesterday who was looking for some advice. I said, when one door closes, another one opens. And that has happened every time in my life. And there's been a lot of doors that have been shut in my face.
Well, I think, with the widows that I've dealt with or that I've worked with, they don't have that faith right then. Right. They are so devastated. They can't see a better day. What do you share with, and I'm sure that you have clients and friends and family that have also gone through that. What do you say to them, or how did you, not every, it takes a lot to pull that out of yourself.
It does. So if I'm going to be specifically talking about widows, I understand that not everyone, to your point, is going to be able to pull themselves out for whatever reason. For widows, what I do is I introduce them to an organization that's called the Modern Widows Club. The Modern Widows Club is an organization where widows mentor widows. It is a worldwide organization. They happen to be based here in Orlando. If I'm working with a widow that I engage with, I tell them this should be your first point of reference before doing anything with me. because I don't know your experience. I can't live through your experience. But what I can do is give you access to where you can immediately go and engage with this organization, and you can get someone that is similar age, similar ethnicity, similar lifestyle, similar socioeconomic background, similar family structure, that can work and talk with you and mentor you. That's the most powerful thing that I can do. And I can't tell you after I have done that with Wiz, and I tell them we should not engage until after you have some time with this organization. And they've come back and said, wow, this is very, very helpful. And through the organization, there's travel groups. They have some sort of text message chains. They have Facebook groups, and it's just really, really good. So that is how I help them to try to essentially pull themselves out of a situation. The other thing too that I do, and I'm not a counselor, but I always ask the question, have you considered any type of counseling? And it's not my place to push this, but it is my place to ask and know where they are. And so one of the widows that I spoke with, she's like, I'm not seeing a counselor yet, but I'm speaking to my other friend who is a widow. So very parallel with regard to the Modern Widows Club, but she's done that on her own level. So she doesn't think that she is pulling herself out. But when someone like me comes in and say, hey, you are already doing that, and I recognize that and I highlight that and I say, that's a very defined skill set where you are aligning yourself with someone that is in a similar situation, and now you can talk through it. That's a very, very powerful thing. And sometimes I just come in and I recognize things that they are in such a fog that they can't see, from the sky, what's really going on with them. And respectable, you shouldn't be able to. But those are some of the steps that I help to pull some folks out. And I never push counseling. And I just asked the question. There was another widow some years ago that we had engaged, and she couldn't function beyond today, right? And I made the recommendation that I think you should engage with some other entity before you engage with me. And it went about 6 months, and she called me up out of the blue, and I said, well, what made the change? And she's like, you made a recommendation on counseling, and I took that, and I've been going through counseling, and now the brain fog is lifted. So a couple other things too about counseling where I'm thinking about it. So my mom had hospice, right? I volunteer for hospice as a result of that, just about on a weekly basis.
Wow,
Hospice.
that is that service, that privilege is, I don't know how you have all the time.
Well, I feel like
Wow.
I have no choice, and I'm
Yeah.
obligated to do that. Hospice also offers free grief counseling, whether you were associated with hospice or not.
Wow.
So a free resource. And so since we're talking about hospice, some of the things that hospice allows me to do, and I've been volunteering for hospice since 2016, so 10 years, right? And so they gave me very specific training on how to work with someone that is a hospice patient. And so some of that training, and every week I have this on the job training, right? I'm very close and near to someone who is going to see the other side. But what it's done for me, it's paralleled this experience I had with my mother, because I was the one that said to my mom, you can let go now. Everybody is come and see you through the nursing home, right? There's nobody else that's coming. And understanding what her body does and what it looks like when she is going to start passing on. I can't tell you now. I have this formalized training behind me that stamps that experience that I went through. And now I'm able to identify it when I'm with hospice patients. And so I have to give a report every week after I go and see a hospice patient. And I can't tell you how many times I have given a report and with the training, and that patient has passed away within 7 days. The hair stood up on my arm when it happened the first time. I gave a report and I said to them, I don't think she's going to live by the time that I go see her next week. And Betty, when I showed up to her, for my hospice visit the next week, the ambulance was there taking her away. So it's experiences like that, and it's I'm going to use this word cruelly, but it's fun for me, not in the aspect of seeing people pass on, but the dignity that I'm able to give someone and the light that I'm able to give someone, whether it's in a hospice capacity or whether it's in a client's capacity. So that's really
Yeah.
where it's fun for me.
Well, it's such a gift and
It
a
is.
privilege,
Yes,
right?
I would agree with you.
To be with someone at, one of the most important times of their existence, right? Of their life here on earth. And I think people listening to the podcast are probably surprised that we're not really spending a lot of time on technical pieces, right? We're talking about brain fog. We're talking about how to get through and how the technical pieces, the practical pieces, while they're there and you need support for that, it's really this emotional heavy fog. Can you explain how advisors like you get involved? Or I mean, I think people are surprised that you would say, no, no, hold off on us working together. I think you should um, go off and get some more support first. I think listeners who aren't familiar would say, well, what if they have to decide this, this, and this? Wouldn't it be good to do both? Like, why wouldn't you recommend having counseling or connecting with a group or another widow along with a financial advisor?
Sure. I'm going to dig into my certified financial transitionist training.
Hmm.
And so what
Do you
I
want to
have
explain what
learned,
that is to folks who don't
yes,
know what that is?
sure. Certified financial transitionist. It is someone who specializes in helping folks with transitions, specifically money transitions. And so all of that experience that I told you that I have, right? I have now instincts that I work with. But my instincts are not necessarily a repeatable process for someone else. And so the Sud Money Institute, Susan Bradley, who is the founder and the creator of this, it felt like someone was studying my life, right? And then they stamped this with scientific theory. And now there are processes that, you can kind of go forward with. And so now I have these processes that I can stamp with my personal experience, and they just jive and they just go hand in hand. And so the widow that I spoke about, one of the first things that I do is I do something that's called communication preferences. How do you like to communicate? Do you like to have phone calls? Do you like to have Zoom calls? Do you like me to come to your house in person? Do you like emails? Do you like text messages? What is that you like? Just imagine if you like text messages and I'm calling you all the time. How annoying would that be? But I understand that it's quick, right? And it may be preferred, and you may not be in an emotional state where you could talk on the phone. I understand that. So in my certified financial transitionist training, there's a lot of things that kind of go on there. And so you talk about the application of decision making with emotions, right? Emotions dictate decision making. Even if you have the technical right answer, and I'll give you another specific situation. So I had a client a couple of years ago. They had a house here in Orlando, and they were building a house in one of the Carolinas. And the financial decision was like, sell this house in Orlando. You could put it towards the house in one of the Carolinas. And I'm talking to her, and these decisions completely conflict. But she had a lot of stuff emotionally that was going on in her life. So what we did is we laid out, right, how much it would cost to hold this house in Orlando. And it was known how much it cost. The emotional component, hold the house. It makes you feel better, right? You know this financial component, and we're going to have to get over this. But if we're looking at both things, and you have to spend, and I'm going to just use extreme amounts here. If you have to spend $10, right, to maintain your emotions intact, well, I'm going to spend $100 because the long-term effects, I know that of my emotional stability, it's priceless. And so what I said to this particular client, hold the house and don't put a time frame on it because you know that you can afford it. And I said to her, even if you couldn't afford it, we could make arrangements for you to protect your emotional integrity here. There are some workarounds that we can, get creative with. So that is that's an aspect of where this emotional, and I call this other aspect, the technical, they sometimes collide. And oftentimes they collide.
Yep.
And so my job, your job now becomes, where's that fine balance between the emotional side and the technical side? And I know the decision making, like I said, is going to be dictated and predicated on emotion. And so understanding that, knowing that, and helping bridge that gap, because you're a CFP, Betty. I'm a CFP. That aspect becomes a lot easier because we've been doing this for so long. If they come to me, if they come to you, the technical aspect is probably going to be remotely similar because of our professional training and our professional experience. But that emotional component, how you massage that in, that's where it really makes the difference.
Yeah, I tell folks that the technical stuff is actually the easier piece, right?
Yes. Yep. 100%.
And that's where the art comes in of what we do and the personalization, right?
Yes.
I think that's helpful for people to understand what a financial or certified financial transitionist is. And Susan Bradley's work is very well respected and well known. I did want to take a little time and talk again about the book the last part of your title is when money, trauma, grief, and racism collide. And we've talked about money, talked about grief, but you put these four things together, and I wanted to make sure we had enough time to. It's a big topic, but what made you choose this part of your title, and what does that mean to you, and what do you mean by it? I think some people will think, how does that work, right? How do those things connect or intertwine?
Sure. And thank you for asking me to go there. So Betty and I talked before the podcast, and I'm going to use my kids, right? What they say about me. They say that daddy is built differently, and I'm built differently because of the experiences that I've gone through. And I like to share personal stories, and money, trauma, grief, and racism. This story that I'm about to share with you bridges the gap for each one of those. Okay. So my wife and I bought a condo early 2000s, downtown Orlando. So we've owned it for, say, 20 years. And this condo had a window that was broken, right? And I had a couple of younger female tenants that lived there. And so it posed a security risk if someone could get in there. And I'm thinking about risk. And so I go to the condo, and so I say to them, I need to get this window replaced, knowing that there are other units in the complex that have had the same windows that are replaced. And these were the old style 80 windows that were roll up, and it got damaged, and we just needed to put just a flat window. So they approved the window, and as a formality, I had to go to the meeting. And so I go to the meeting, and I've had this experience at other times. So people hear me, they may speak to me on the phone, they don't see me, but when they see me in person, it's a different story. Betty is smiling, she knows what I'm talking about. And so I go to this meeting, and there were some things that can't come to light at the meeting. It wasn't because of me, it was just because of some impropriety between the president of the HOA and the manager, right? There was some sort of improper relationship that was going on there. It was discovered during this meeting, and so the HOA president becomes very irate with me. I'm the subject of his frustration. And so they deny my window. And fine, we can get through those mechanics, right? But I understand why it was denied. So after the meeting, this is where things really start to escalate. I go out and I'm getting ready to go to my car. I'm talking to another homeowner. And the HOA president comes to me and he puts his finger in my face and he says, "You people make the values of our condos go down." So I'm going to bridge some things for you. So all the racism and things and discrimination I've gone through in my life now have come to the surface, right? My wife and I purchased this property well in advance of this HOA president ever being in the complex. He's accusing me now of bringing down the values of the property. He is now denied a window, right? A couple $100 window that is a security risk for my tenants, and it could cause a problem if I sold it later. And so I just brought up the money aspect. Well, not really the money aspect yet, but the trauma, the grief, and the racism, right? I brought all those up. So the money aspect, where this really comes into place, is now I have to hire an attorney. And my attorney, goes to them, and what they come back to me and say, "Well, we want you to replace all the windows in your condo." No, that's blatant discriminatory practices. And so I go around the complex, and there are 11 other units that have the exact same window by the exact same company that was replaced, right? So now I'm out money to the attorney to pay for this, where other people in the same complex have given the exact same treatment. Now, Chris Dale and Anne Marie Dale now have to go and spend probably $4,000 or $5,000 for this window, Betty, that probably costs $500.
Right.
So my entire life has been like that. There's been a second job my entire life. I could tell you ad nauseum police incidences where I was profiled. It happens. It happens to everybody, right? I'm not going to dwell on it. I could tell you another situation where there was someone that discriminated my wife and I, and someone that actually threatened my life, that we had to drag through the legal system to make a point. It cost $10,000 to $20,000 to do that, Betty. That's a monetary aspect. That's not something that everybody else has to go through. And it's not fair. It is my reality. And I'm fortunate that I can find the money to be able to fund these things. It's not easy. And I'm not going to lie. For some of these situations, we've had to accumulate some semblance of debt. But I am not going to stand for someone that doesn't like me just because of what I look like. That is not my problem any longer. If somebody else has a problem with what I look like, they can just move the other way. And it's happened. It has happened. And these situations, like I said to my wife, it's not going to happen any longer where somebody just steamrolls or they feel entitled. That they can just roll over. I'm a nice guy, Betty. I'm not going to get loud. I am not going to yell and scream at you.
I concur. You're one of the best humans I've met.
Well, I would. Some of my friends probably wouldn't concur on that. But earlier in life, I probably would have gotten in your face, and I probably would have. There would have been a physical altercation. And that example that I shared with you, it took everything within my ability not to basically drag this guy on the ground and just started beating him ad nauseum. I was thinking about, I have a great job. Um, I have two kids that I'm an example for. I'm married and I can't go to jail. Those are the only things that were going through my mind at that point. And that was the only thing that kept me. I mean, you can imagine I was very, very upset in that moment. And I had to close my eyes, step back. And in that moment, after I did that, I said to that gentleman, "Are you done?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, this is the only time in your lifetime that you will ever speak to me like this. It will never happen again without a formalized consequence." And he said to me, "Are you threatening me?" And I said, "I'm telling you how it is. It's not going to happen again." And to take this a step further, there were probably 4 or 5 other board members that were watching this, and no one intervened. No one said one word. And so the other aspect that I've understood too is a lot of times I'm on an island by myself and I don't have the expectation that anybody else is going to step in.
Yeah, that was a comment in your book that also touched that you feel very lonely on the journey. Um,
Conversely, though, I like to give balanced feedback in that regard. In college, I had a friend that I had known for probably 11 years or so, and he had been drinking, and he used a racial slur towards me. I hit him, Betty. I hit him in the face. Again, that's the 21-year-old Chris Dale versus the almost 50-year-old Chris Dale. And in that moment, I realized that there are very good people. So my god brother to this day and his wife, they were part of that group. They isolated this gentleman, and actually there were other people in that circle. They saw the rage right in me, and they removed me because understanding someone that I knew and I was totally genuine with this other individual, and for them to hold this back for 11 years, how much anger I excuse me, I had in the moment. And I tell this story to my boys. I hit him one time and he had a bloody nose. And I can only imagine if there was no one else there, what would have happened. By the grace of God, I had good people around me. And Sean is my god brother. And I don't think he really understood in the moment how monumental that was. But for me, it was a life, he made a life altering choice. Sean did. And so we are, whether he likes it or not, we are we are fused at the hip because of that. Um, and there are good people. But again, because of my experience, I don't rely and I don't expect other people to step in. Because if I do, then I'm let down. But
well, it's
Sean, I
very,
do
I
have an
think those are the
expectation.
things, yeah, that people don't understand how hurtful it is, um, especially with someone you have such a long relationship with, for them to hear how they really feel about you.
Correct.
Um, yeah, it's we've talked about this, and Chris has been my mentor for some of this. I'm not as far along in my journey as he is, but it is, the reality is in our industry, 25% of women, there's only 25% who are women who are CFPs, um, and there's only 4% who are Asian, right? So it is, and I don't know what the statistics are for African American and Hispanics, but it's very, very low as well.
Sure.
So we are, you know, paving a way that we haven't been historically. So, I had reached out to Chris for some guidance on how to navigate this situation with grace and how to be true to myself. And I've found him to be so helpful. So thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Um, he is just a wealth of experience, the good, bad, and ugly. But he's so generous in sharing it. I mean, I've shared things with Chris that I've not shared with other people who have known me for years. He brings that trust out in people, and I think that's very special. Um,
Make me smile when you say that.
oh, yes. And I just, I think it's important for the many folks who, A, experience the world as a person of color, um, or as a minority in any way, just to know that there are others out there. And it's, hopefully the more folks who don't experience it or haven't thought about it in that way, just to hear from, two nice people trying to make their way through the world, that this stuff is real and it really does affect us in our interactions with the world.
I'm going to take that a step further. I think you articulated that very, very well. I think there's an element of being uncomfortable asking the question. So if you're a non-minority, if you're a non-woman, right? I'm going to have two different categories there. Um, it's uncomfortable, and then there's an element of ignorance that go on. And so again, I'm going to
Blissful
highlight
ignorance, right? They want to remain ignorant. They don't want to even go
yes.
there.
And so I have two different groups of friends that I have a text message chain. Like as we get older, we have text message chains with various people. And so I have a white group and I have a black group. The white group are the guys that I went to high school. I can't call them kids because they're too old. So they're the guys that I went to high school with. And then this other group is a group, it's my black friends, right? That I met them literally the day that I went off to college. And none of us went to college together, but it's just, we just had similar interest. And I would say sometimes the different views that come into the white group, and I rarely ever defend anything that goes on, but some of the, and I wouldn't say that it's anything that is malicious or anything that necessarily offends me. But I have another guy in the group. He's arguably one of my best friends in the white group, right? That has taken the time and energy to understand all of the stuff that I've gone through as a black man. And I'm telling him this information. He's a white guy and he doesn't have the lived experience that I have. And he will defend because it makes him so mad that some of these things come out in ignorance, right? And my capacity now, if I hear something, unless it directly affects me, I'm not going to respond to it. It just doesn't, it's not worth my time and energy. But to see this dynamic happen in my white friend group, and again, there's nothing that's blatant. It might be something that's politically motivated that happens. And we'll have meaningful dialogue about this. And it's really nice to see. And there was one situation. There was a coach that died. That he was a basketball coach back in the day, and I sent something in again in this white group, and I sent it. And so one of the guys in the group who was not in basketball like a lot of the other guys, he said, "Well, Chris, is that your uncle, right?" And so then he realized, like after that and what transpired, and he's like, "Man, that was so bad of me to say that." And it was like an assumption. But in his mind, he was thinking that was an uncle that everybody else knew except for him. And I said, "Hey man, there's no offense taken. You didn't really know who this guy was." But for him to have the presence of mind to think advanced that this could have been offensive. It wasn't offensive to me,
Yeah,
but it could have been. But those are, how breaking down and asking the questions, some of these barriers.
absolutely. I mean, I think friends and I had this conversation this weekend. It's about intent,
Right.
right? If it's malicious, if it's, as we've talked about, I've been threatened. I've been gone through a lot of racism that was very scary. Um, it's not the comments. It's not. It's how it's said, why it's said, and I think we get a very good. I call it the spidey sense, right? You feel it. They could look nice as pie, but you know.
Right. Yeah.
And but it's even worse when you don't know, like your friend,
Right.
like, and that's happened to me too, where it's very hurtful. I had a friend for many, many years, tell me that I was the good kind of Asian. And so it was, we're no longer friends, but it is
Sure.
just one of those things where once upon a time that would have been okay to me. So things have been changing for me as well. It's a journey for all of us to manage through this world.
Sure.
Um, okay. Well, I know we could talk about the topic for much, much longer, but I think all these experiences, grief, racism, trauma, um, they all intersect and inform who we are and how we deal with money.
Sure.
Um, and I guess, all these things are so heavy and how you carry yourself. What do you do for yourself to make the load lighter for yourself?
Well, I've gone through a lot of counseling, some very deep counseling, similar to that of soldiers coming back from war, called EMDR. I think that was probably one of the biggest turning points for me is to I can't say that I necessarily identified that, but going through counseling, I think my counselor identified some things that were not right. So taking that step and digging through and processing all of this stuff the right way. Betty, I feel light now. I feel really light. And being able to do that and having the help and the support to foster that. And so there's no doubt I'm going to get into situations again, just as life will have it. But
Right.
now it's how I deal with these situations. And I said this to one of my buddies too. That's on the Black text message chain. He was
And for,
like,
for folks who don't know, we call it code switching, right?
yes, code switching. And so he said to me, "Why do you meditate every morning?" And I said, I do two things every morning. I meditate, well, three things. I make my bed and I stretch. And he's like, "Well, why do you do all those things?" And I said, "Because those are the only things in my day that I'm ever going to be able to control." And when I told him that, like a day later, I said a client of mine died. And so my whole day was just shot, right? But when I got up, I didn't do anything but did those three things and I controlled those things. And if so much of your life has been out of control, like mine has, I want to feel like I'm in control of something. And so I can control those three things. Not always, because of the kids or whatever the schedule is like, or something happens. But most days I'm able to do that, with the meditation, and it just really grounds me. And the other things too that I do to self preserve myself is I always take time for myself. Now, it's been hard to do that, but I take time for myself, and my therapist and we go through this. Like, what have you done for yourself? So I exercise every day. Betty sidetracked me today a little bit. I exercised a little bit before, and I'm going to exercise a little bit more. But those things are important to me.
Yes.
Then I take myself to lunch on a regular basis. I go to church by myself. Very important for me because I don't want the cloud of anything else other than me in church. I'm Catholic, and then I go to my church with my family on Sundays. Um, I hang out with my friends a lot. Sometimes I fight it and they just show up at my house. But it's things like I have these systems in place that keep me grounded and just keep me going. I have something always to look forward to in the next moment, right? As someone that's 50 or almost about to be 50, I had a colonoscopy last year, right? So after the colonoscopy, what did my buddies do? They showed up at my house. I had a clean scan, and I was like, I don't want you guys here. But those are systems that have been developed, right, in place, and they wanted to celebrate that with me. That makes me feel good. And my buddies too. One of the probably the most important things and you were telling all these lies about me up front. So my buddies do is they normalize everything. So no matter how low I get or no matter how high I get, they always keep me in the middle. Chris, you're no better than the rest of us, right? And that is absolutely true. And we are all basically mentors for each other's kids. That is a staple in our lives, no matter what decisions we make, right? And so that's something that's very, very important. My kids don't care about, what I mean, they do, right? But most kids, they're involved in their own thing and they don't see their parents as something else. Like Michael
Right.
Jordan, right? He's my favorite basketball player of all time. His kids weren't
Woohoo.
saying you're Michael Jordan, not like in the same light as I'm saying Michael Jordan. And so that's what each one of our kids, that's how they look at, we call them the uncles or the parents.
Yeah.
And it's really a humbling experience to have that because now we each have gifts that we can extend to each one of them. My gift just happens to be financial in this life experience. But another one of my buddies, his gift is construction. I don't know anything about construction. Another buddy, his gift is the hotel industry. How many hookups have we gotten on hotels for traveling over the years? So it's
Everyone
just
has a
stuff
friend
like
like
that.
that.
That's cool. Yeah, it's cool
You looking
like
for more
that.
friends?
Yeah, always. So it's stuff like that. It keeps me grounded, and I look forward to doing things. The other thing too that I am starting to talk about a lot is I do a lot of coaching. And it first came out of my youngest son not wanting to play soccer some years ago because, he's like, I'm not going to do this unless you're my coach. But this turned into a situation to where I don't coach anymore. I'm the coach on the field or on the court, right? But when my sons are involved, I'm not the coach anymore. They are the coaches, right? They're the coach on the floor. They're coaching the kids. I'm really just rotating at this point. And it it me looking at that, I was like, man, my stamp and my legacy is now, it's different because now my boys have these gifts that I've instilled in them. And we talk about it too. One of the things that I joke about somehow, somewhere along the line, I said, most kids, boys in particular, they would pay for their father's time, right? I would have paid for my father's time. And I said, are you guys going to pay me for my time? And they're like, no, we're not paying you for your time because we have your time all the time anyways. But it's things like that where, my father, before he injected himself in my life, he would substitute time with material objects. And
That's pretty
so
common, right?
it is very common. And so I don't, my boys, I don't really give them a lot of stuff. Amory likes to give gifts, but that's not my thing with the boys. We just spend time with each other. And we just have routines and we spend a lot of time. Sometimes I tell them I have to get away from them and I need some time for myself, but it's just part of it, right? They'll tell me the same thing. They're candid with me. I need some space, Daddy. But the best gift that I could give them or any other child that I'm spending time with, whether it's mentor capacity or coaching, is the gift of time.
And
So,
attention. Yeah.
and
The
attention,
time, the
right?
attention, right? Being there, present.
Yes. So I could go on and on. Love buckets with kids. Um, I read a lot now. Love buckets for both my kids. So my older son likes words of affirmation, and he likes basically time spent, quality time. My younger son likes quality time, and he likes physical touch. And
He's a
so
snuggler.
he well.
Not yet,
He's
not anymore.
well, no, he likes to beat me up. So that's
Oh,
that's his
I
physical
forget.
touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, he likes to beat me up. So, but understanding those
Yeah.
things when
Uh-huh.
you're working with kids is very, very important too. So, and it's cool to see those things manifest each other. So,
Well, how can people find you? How can they connect with you on a professional basis? Obviously your book comes out, or when this podcast is released, your book will be have already been released on Amazon, so that's where people can find it. And we'll put a link into the show notes for that. But what are other ways people can find you or connect with you?
yeah, I'd like to keep it simple. So, my website is Life After Grief, FP, as in financialplanning.com. And then I'm going to give you my email address. It's hello@lifeaftergrieffp.com. I'm on LinkedIn under Christopher Dale. anything that is life after grief related, that is probably how you're going to find me. Online, it was very strategic to do that, and I got some very good help in doing that. But my website and then my email address is probably the easiest way to do that. My wife sometimes gets annoyed at me because I am a little bit probably too responsive, but she also understands that there are people that I am gravely helping. So we do carve time out for that. So, but thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I mean, thank you for, as always, being so generous with your time and your stories, um, and being so candid. I think the biggest takeaway is that, there's no one right path, right? And it's trying to put the right people and systems into place, I would say,
Sure.
um, and I guess giving yourself some grace, right?
Forgiveness and grace. I would agree with
Forgiveness
you.
and grace.
Yep.
And yeah, if you're listening to this and you're looking for support or knowing someone who needs support, just, I guess, reach out to the, what is the widows group that we should,
The Modern Widows Club.
Modern Widows Club.
Yep.
You don't have to have everything figured out right away. And of course, I think Chris's book would be a great help, support, also very interesting. I think there's a lot of twists that I wasn't expecting. Um, it's a very, very personal book, much like how he is in person on this podcast. He's very open. And some of the things he talks about are uncomfortable for a lot of people to not even talk about, but to hear about. So his book is called Life After Grief, Holding the Numbers with Shaking Hands, How Money, Trauma, Grief, and Racism Collide. And it'll be available on Amazon. And if this conversation was helpful, remember that you don't have to make perfect decisions. You just have to make the next little baby step, right? It's all little baby steps. So until next time, thank you for joining us. And I hope you'll join us again for next month's episode.